Just a couple of seconds. Okay. Looks like most of our participants have entered. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We wanted to host this virtual town hall to share more about the idea of creating a rebuilding authority for the fire recovery process. We're joined here tonight by Senator Ben Allen, as well as Blue Ribbon commissioners who worked on this concept. Who are also experts as well as survivors of the Palisades and Eaton fires. That's Cecilia Estelano and Tracy Quinn. You'll be hearing from them next, and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions, to add your questions to the Q&A as well. Just to provide a little context, so far, LA County is leading the fastest fire debris removal program in the nation. Over 4,000 properties have been cleared, and we expect by the end of the month a substantial number of all of the properties that were handed over to the Army Corps to be completed. Next is the rebuilding step, which we know is incredibly important to get right. It is top of mind for all of our residents. It is not only important to rebuild your individual homes, but how we rebuild community and work together to support you in doing so. The county launched a self-certification program to fast track our plan approvals for the rebuilding process. So for those of you who are in unincorporated Los Angeles County, that process will be available to you. I know the city of Los Angeles has also launched their own program as well. We convened a Blue Ribbon Commission of experts partnering with UCLA who held or attended approximately 60 community meetings and made recommendations on how we can come together to recover resiliently, safely, and affordably. The Rebuilding Authority has gotten a lot of attention. It is a top recommendation from the Blue Ribbon Commission. The idea is to create a county-wide rebuilding authority to lead the recovery across fire-impacted areas, just as the county did with the fire debris removal process. To be clear and to address some misinformation that has been out there, so just to start right out, the authority is not proposing to take land use or permitting powers away from any existing jurisdictions. Instead, what this authority does is creates an opportunity for a unified regional approach to rebuild. And this approach is what happened in major disasters like the Northridge earthquake, Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy, and even with 9/11. And so the goals really are to raise, bundle, and administer funding to support the rebuild. That can be done in a variety of ways, including tax increment financing, combining city and county funds, state and federal grants, philanthropy, and more. We would also like to see this authority have the ability to do bulk purchasing to scale the rebuild and to reduce costs that each of those who are impacted will be experiencing. The idea here is also to support residents as well as businesses to be able to remain in communities. We know there's a lot of anxiety around news about purchase of properties and the concern that the community people will come back to will be very different than what was once there. And this gives us the opportunity to intervene in that way and to help protect community interests. Another goal of this authority would to build fire safe infrastructure as well as community amenities. We know that there's a role and responsibility in addressing all of the infrastructure needs of the region at this point in time as well. And we want to develop and support a workforce to meet the demand because we know this scale is significant and we know everyone is interested in getting back to their community as quickly as possible. The authority would be optional for cities who want to join in, for homeowners and businesses. And the rebuild will still be led with private sector participation. The idea behind this authority is really to help streamline, to accelerate, and to support in the recovery process. We know that many homeowners have never built their own homes. And so going through this process is incredibly new. For some people, they will have the resources, the know-how, and ability to do everything on their own. This authority is not intended to get in your way. But for those who are trying to drive down cost, to leverage scale in terms of materials purchase, labor coordination, working together as we have during the fire debris removal process, if this is all new to you, this authority would be a place where you can go to get that extra help and support and to be able to move forward at a quicker pace. So where we are in this process, the Blue Ribbon Commission proposed that this concept be explored, and this concept is now being discussed at a couple of different levels. I brought forward a motion to the County Board of Supervisors to explore the legal pathway for LA County to be able to help establish and lead on the creation of this kind of authority for the region. And this motion didn't set into action any specific establishment of the authority. It simply outlines what authority currently exists within the county to be able to do so. And if we wanted this authority to do some of those things that I just described, would we need additional authorities and from whom in order to make that happen? Senator Allen's bill is SB 549. It's a parallel approach to accomplish a similar goal, and he's going to be able to speak to the details of that next. Both paths propose county-led authority that would have cities with the opportunity to opt in. And when I say county-led, it's county-led in the sense that the county also helped to lead the fire debris removal process. But we know that U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and EPA and other partners were critical in making that happen. So in the same way, we want this to be community-led. We want there to be community participation. We want there to be engagement from all of the jurisdictions who want to be part of this coordinated effort. We can work with and incorporate all the good ideas that are already being developed and discussed. I know that that Councilwoman Park has brought forward the concept of a climate resilience district, which was a version of how you could do tax increment financing to help support the rebuild efforts. LA County and Senator Sasha Perez worked together to create a new disaster recovery district EIFD proposal. The Palisades Recovery Commission has recommended developing a cement batch plant. I know that the Builders Alliance work has come together proposing a platform to reduce costs through bulk purchasing. So there are lots of good ideas out there, and having a centralized authority makes sure that we are not duplicating those efforts, that they're happening in one place so people aren't getting confused and then feeling misinformation. It's a centralized place where we can go to bring these good ideas together to make sure that they actually get the support and lift off that they need, most importantly, to support the community members. The cleanup process showed that we need an Army Corps approach to the rebuild, and the authority will help us do that. This is tonight an opportunity to hear from you. We know that there are lots of questions, concerns, interests, ideas, and so we wanted to create more space for conversation, and we'll continue to do so in the future. We want to make sure people's voices are heard, that we incorporate feedback, that we create as we move forward with this idea that is created with the needs and concerns of community driving this. And so we want all of that to be part of the process. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Senator Ben Allen, who will share more about his bill, SB 549.
Well, thanks, Lindsay, and nice to see everybody on the call. I just wanted to explain some of the nuances of the policy process up here in Sacramento, which can be a bit confusing, and kind of how I got involved in this whole process. So I've been following the development of the Blue Ribbon Commission report and the idea of this resilient rebuilding authority as it was being developed over the past few months. I after the fire happened, I did a bit of a deep dive into all sorts of different rebuilds and recovery processes, just as did the commission. And one thing you did see in a couple places, especially after Hurricane Katrina 9/11, uh, this effort to try to put together an authority that could help to coordinate efforts across different governmental jurisdictions and provide a faster and cheaper path for people to rebuild. And particularly coordinating mass purchase of construction materials, managing local workforce. Some of the things that Lindsay was talking about has been utilized effectively in other places. And so the Blue Ribbon Commission came out with this recommendation on a Friday. I think it was like a June 20th. And I literally had, if you want to introduce a bill middle of the year, you basically, if you do typically introduce bills in January and February, but if you want to introduce a bill later in the year, we literally had till June 23rd to introduce a bill. It was our last deadline for the calendar year. And so we got the recommendations on Friday, and Monday was my deadline. So, basically, we ended up taking draft language from Supervisor Horvath's office that we put into Legislative Council, and it just allowed us to pursue this path if this is something that we're going to want to do. And what I've said to everybody, including community members, the press, etc., is I have no idea whether a legislative approach will come together this year. I certainly am not interested in doing anything that's jamming the community or ramming down people's throats. But I thought there was some really interesting ideas in the commission report, and I wanted to at least preserve the option for us to move forward if that was something that we all decided was a good idea. Couple things to just clear up. First of all, I read some of a couple comments online. First of all, the governance of the authority. The Blue Ribbon Commission recommended a state level authority with appointments made by the governor, legislature, and impacted local governments. It's my feeling that this type of authority would be best led at the local level and have the governance structure determined by the forming local governments. And I think very central to that was going to have to be the folks closest to the community, the city council member, etc. Another thing that may be confusing about the bill text of SB 549, for those of you who really did a deep dive, is that the section on the second Neighborhood Infill Finance and Transit Improvements Act, NIFTY 2, which was basically we were utilizing this bill that was already introducing this other financing system, and so it's really unrelated to the authority, but it's still on the subject of giving local governments more flexibility to invest in their community. So the two sections of the bill aren't linked, and there's no requirement or expectation that this authority would be a NIFTY 2 district. If people want more details on this, I can get into it, but that was something I want people to know. The other thing is there was some rumor going around that we all needed feedback from the community by July 7th. That's not true. We have the whole summer to take in feedback if we want to pursue this bill this year. Obviously, if it's going to be next year, we're going to have all the way through the fall. But if we do want to do it this year, we do have until the end of August to receive feedback and finalize language to make sure that it aligns with local community support. If the community doesn't want or need a resilient rebuilding authority, we're not going to advance the bill or force the policy on folks. In the end of the day, my idea in introducing this was to use the bill to advance local control over the rebuilding process and provide some tools to local governments to get the job done based on what we heard had worked successfully in other parts of the country when there had been disasters. But it's certainly what Lindsay and I had a great meeting with Tracy Park just the other day, and it's our plan to meet with members of the Palisades and Altadena communities to hear people's feedback over the next couple of months, hosting webinars. We're talking about doing an in-person as well, just to see if people like the idea, if they if we do want to pursue it, what it might look like, what they would want to see in the authority. And at the end of the day, I mean, this webinar is primarily the supervisors, but I did want to jump on and be a part of this because for me, I just wanted to make sure folks knew how important local engagement was in this process. I look forward to engagement from the community. I look forward to just hearing lots of concerns and issues and ideas as we try to figure out a path forward and if this is a good idea that will help the community. From my perspective, this is all about making the rebuild easier. If folks don't feel like they want this, we don't need to pursue it. But if it's something that's worth doing to help make the rebuild in the community easier, I think that at least the discussion merits a conversation and a deep dive. And so that's the spirit with which I approach this question. My staff's going to be on the call tonight, and we're also going to be available to address whatever questions that people might have on a going forward basis. But I look forward to both this discussion and future ones as we try to figure out what path we want to take. I know we're going to be hosting our own community webinar on the topic. I think in a couple weeks, at least that's our plan right now. And then the Councilmember Park and I think the supervisor too, we've been talking about an in-person town hall on this and other rebuilding related topics. So my best to everybody. I know how hard this whole process has been. We've been working on a number of bills including just recently, we just got a bill out of committee relating to the mobile home park and making sure that the owners there might have the opportunity to purchase that property. We're working on contents coverage issues, a whole slew of insurance issues. But I do want to just reiterate, if people are continuing to have insurance challenges, please do reach out to our office. We've been working with the insurance commissioner intensely to try to get people's issues resolved. And we just welcome your stories and your challenges if you need help on the insurance side.
Thank you so much, Senator. I really appreciate you being with us tonight. And yes, we want to have as many conversations as we possibly can, recognizing that there is a need for to address a lot of the concerns that are coming forward. And I think, I shared this with you and the council member when we spoke earlier this week. One of the things that I think is really driving a sense of urgency around this for me is the concerns I hear from the community about land being purchased, outside speculators coming in, what that could mean for destruction of a community, and how we find a way to have there be an authority that can help us and property owners who rightly might not want to rebuild. How do we make sure that there's an entity that can help secure that land and keep it at close to being community based and controlled? And this authority would give us the ability to do that, among the other things that we've talked about. So I know that we are showing up with intentions that try to meet the concerns that we've heard. And that's why we want to continue to have conversations so the concerns continue to get vetted through dialogue, and that we create an authority that truly meets the needs of our residents whom we're trying to serve with this effort. Next, I want to introduce Cecilia Estelano, who has personal experience navigating recovery after the fires. And Cecilia, we are grateful for your service. We are incredibly sorry for what you have experienced this year. And knowing what we are facing and what professional experience and expertise you bring to the conversation, we feel very lucky that you have not only participated in the Blue Ribbon Commission, but continue to help advance this work for the region to benefit everyone. You have professional experience as former head of the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles, as the CEO of Estelano Advisors and Better World Group. So what should we know about the potential impact of an authority? How do you see it accelerating rebuilding and being a value add to the community?
Thank you, Supervisor Horvath. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve on the Blue Ribbon Commission, and thank you also for the opportunity to be at this town hall. So as Supervisor Horvath noted, I too have been affected by this fire. So let me just, by way of introduction, I'm a land use and environmental lawyer and an urban planner, but I'm also somebody who lost her home in the Eden Canyon fire. And I now live in the city of Los Angeles, and I lost my community 6 months ago. But I've had the opportunity through this Blue Ribbon Commission to be able to apply some of what I know professionally to how do we deal with this problem. So let me go right into how this rebuilding authority would work. We made a recommendation in the Blue Ribbon Commission, and we talked about different governance structures and a variety of things. But the key points here is that the scale of the devastation of the fires are so vast that something extraordinary needs to be created to help manage the rebuilding and to do it in a way that's going to ensure that the communities come back even remotely resembling what they were before in terms of the mix of incomes, the mix of uses, the character of the community. And I say that after spending these several months working with these commissions, the commissioners who've worked on recovery for disasters all across the country, UCLA, their incredible research abilities. What we learned is that the best recoveries happen when you have the creation of an authority like this, an authority that's able to buy and sell land, to bank the land, to make sure that you can coordinate the infrastructure rebuilding, coordinate the construction activities that happen, be able to provide the kind of lending programs that can soften the blow, the financial gap between what you might have received from your insurance company and the actual cost of rebuilding through things like soft second loans, where they're either low or no interest loans that can be made through this financing structure. An authority whose entire purpose every day is focused on getting the rebuilding done. So that is why that was one of our number one overarching recommendation, is to form a rebuilding recovery authority. I will say that as I was the CEO of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles, I had the honor to actually be the head of 4 redevelopment project areas that were formed as a result of the Northridge earthquake. They were formed after the Northridge earthquake to help those communities recover, and were some of the most successful project areas that we had. There was a singular focus on that rebuilding, on making sure that we planned the infrastructure, we made the programs available, and that we coordinated this with all of the other entities involved in the recovery. So I know from personal experience that this type of structure can work, and that we've done it in California, we've done it in Los Angeles. So I know there have been questions about, how does this tax increment financing work? How does this actually create more resources? So I'm going to get a little bit technical, but I think it's really important to explain this. When you own property, you pay property tax, and that a share of that goes to the county, a share of that goes to the city, to the school district, to the community college district, to a variety of other agencies. What's being proposed here, if there's a joint city-county tax increment financing district, is that boundaries be drawn around the recovery area. So in this case, the boundaries may be those affected by the Palisades fire. Maybe there's a separate boundary created for the Eaton Canyon fire, very different communities. So those boundaries are drawn. The amount of property tax that has been collected from that area, you figure out what that base year, and we would probably set the base of 2025 post-fire. So it's a pretty low base. As we begin to rebuild and property values increase, that difference between the base year and the increase is called tax increment. And the city and county's joint share of that tax increment can be somewhere between 25 to 50% of the total increment. This is important. That money can then be used to issue bonds. And this is a very well-established public financing mechanism that the market knows well. Those bonds then generate a lot of upfront money because people are confident of a stream of revenue that will repay it at a government interest rate. And that money can then be used upfront to do things like purchase properties from sellers, willing sellers, folks who may not want to rebuild or may not have the wherewithal or the resources to rebuild, but want a fair price for their property. The authority can purchase that property, and then as they gather all of those properties, aggregate them, be able to do bulk purchasing of construction materials, help in getting a really good price for builders to rebuild at better standards that are fire safe and insurable. Do that and then be able to maybe offer those properties back to the original owners if they'd like to come back in at a reasonable price. In addition, this authority can use some of that tax increment to do things like finance soft second loans. Again, as I noted, the real cost of rebuilding is quite different in many cases from what your insurance proceeds would be. So that difference can then be financed through this soft second program that the authority provides at a very good rate to enable homeowners to go ahead and rebuild. First, they'll pay off the mortgage with their bank, and then only later would they have to pay off the authority piece. So those are the kinds of programs that could be done by this rebuilding authority, including coordinating the infrastructure, rebuilding, including doing workforce development programs so that you can manage the workforce and make sure that we have enough construction workers to do this. That's how it can work. So another question that has come up has been around land banking. How does that actually work? Right now, you really do need special authority to be able to do that purchase that I'm talking about, and then holding, rebuilding, managing, and then providing it back onto the market. And that's one of those things that really you have to have special authorities granted by the legislature to enable that to occur. The last thing I'll say about the rebuilding authority is Palisades was a really special place, as was Sunset Mesa, Malibu, the communities that have been affected, my community, Altadena. It's not just about the homes. It's also about the businesses, the apartments, the trees, the community centers, the parks. The market itself will not bring back all those things. It requires government intervention to make sure that you have the mix of community-oriented retail, the neighborhood shops that you knew and loved can come back. Left to its own devices, the market and the places that we lived in will only rebuild to have much higher rents. Construction is expensive these days, and so somebody has to pay for that. Only if we have the intervention of a government entity that can hold down those costs and provide that kind of buffer are we able to bring back the kind of balanced communities that we enjoyed and loved and cherished. So I can tell you that this is an important recommendation. There are many other recommendations in the report, and I urge you to read it. But this is the one that's gotten a lot of attention, and for a good reason. We know the Palisades will come back in some way or another. This is valuable land, but it's not going to come back to the community you knew and loved unless you have an authority like this that can use those powers to make this a reasonably priced community, that can make this come back and accelerate the rebuilding in a way so that you're not waiting 10, 20 years to get your community back. And with that, Supervisor Horvath, I know we have other speakers. I'll stop there.
Well, we are glad that you're with us, extremely grateful that you're sharing your expertise. This is, bigger than most of us, certainly bigger than what happens only inside government. It takes all of us to get this right, and we couldn't be more grateful that you're here with us. Next, we have a leading voice on environmental protection as the CEO of Heal the Bay, Tracy Quinn, Palisades' own. I know that you too have been experiencing this on a variety of levels, and we are so sorry for the loss that you have faced in the wake of these fires. And we are grateful that you are continuing to persevere, not only for yourself and for your community, but for our entire region. Your leadership has helped us in our recovery in so many ways. How, from your perspective, I know you've been part of our Blue Ribbon Commission as well. So how does the Rebuilding Authority concept further community goals around resilience, building back infrastructure that's needed? And can you also talk a little bit about your experience on the Blue Ribbon Commission and community engagement? Because I know that there have been questions around, who's on this commission, what happened there, who did they talk to, and what has that process been? Thank you.
Sure. So happy to be here. Tracy Quinn, I am a proud Palisadian, and my home is still standing in the Highlands, although I am still displaced and will be for quite some time, like so many of you. Um, just to give a little bit of background, I'm a civil engineer by trade, licensed in the state of California, and spent about a decade working on water and wastewater infrastructure here in Southern California. And throughout my career, I've spent over 20 years working to ensure communities are better prepared for the impacts of climate change. And that's really what I brought to the Blue Ribbon Commission, was, I think the personal experience of being impacted, the conversations that I was having with my neighbors and other members of the community and community leaders, what I was hearing in the community meetings that I was attending. I tried to make sure that I was really well informed. And the Blue Ribbon Commission, I think one thing just that might be helpful for folks, and I see maybe some confusion in some of the questions. The Blue Ribbon Commission is not the authority. So the Blue Ribbon Commission is a group of experts that were appointed and volunteered. We were not paid, and we brought our expertise to make recommendations for ways in which our communities can consider rebuilding that will help us to be more resilient to climate change, more fire resilient, more insurable. So not telling people what to do, but really providing recommendations based on the expertise that we were bringing to the commission. My role on the commission really focused around water infrastructure and climate adaptation infrastructure, really looking at how do we improve our fire resilience and provide additional benefits to the community. How do we reduce the pollution that's reaching our bay? Something obviously important to me as the CEO of Heal the Bay. But how can we really incorporate some of these best practices for climate adaptation into our communities as we're rebuilding? And so one of the benefits that I see of having an authority that's really focused on the rebuilding is the opportunity to make investments in our community for things that would otherwise be really challenging to afford. Creating redundancy in our water supply system so that sprinklers on homes or homes that homeowners who stay behind to wash their homes or leave their landscaping irrigation on to protect their homes in the case of a fire aren't pulling away from the supplies of our firefighters. Creating fire breaks with community parks that can also be places where we're storing storm water or other water that can be used for smaller scale firefighting that's not, again, pulling from our primary drinking water system where the firefighters are going to be using the water. Really trying to address a lot of the things that we found could have gone better in this current fire. This authority could help to make sure that we are investing in. So again, happy to answer any questions about the Blue Ribbon Commission and share a little bit more about some of the solutions that we came up with.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And now is the part of the evening I know everyone is waiting for to be able to ask your questions, but hopefully that gave you some context of what we're talking about in this concept and helped to address at least some of the confusion that has existed around this concept as we really try to flesh it out for the benefit of the community. So we're going to get right into that Q&A. Kicking it off, how will the authority help those who want to rebuild but are facing financial gaps? What are soft seconds? What does that mean, Cecilia? Can you jump in and help us?
Yeah, on the first point, how will it help folks who are rebuilding? So once the authority is formed, it can be a place that can be the focal point for philanthropic dollars or other grant funds to come into. Second, as I noted about the use of tax increment financing, by being able to bond against a stream of future property tax revenue in the area, it can quickly use the proceeds of debt of bonds that are issued to create programs like a soft second program or other forms of ways to help subsidize the rebuilding process. So what's a soft second? A soft second is you get your primary mortgage, but then you still have a gap. You're not able to get the entire amount you need to rebuild. A soft second is a loan that's provided by an entity where essentially you don't have to repay it until you repaid your first loan, and it, depending on the terms, it can actually go away at the end of the term. It's essentially a subsidization of that gap, or it's an extremely low interest loan. The interest doesn't accrue until after a number of years. So it can be structured in a lot of different ways. And sometimes you'll have these financial intermediaries that are available. They get funds from banks. They're called CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions, who are able to provide these soft seconds, but they need a vehicle to do that with. They need to have a government entity. And so the government entity can say, hey, we're going to stand up this program called Soft Seconds for the Palisades. And they can, or for the Palisades Fire folks, and they might invest in that fund. And that fund is then made available. There's some government money in it, but then there's also some of this other money that's made available in it, and it provides a bunch of revenue, a bunch of money that can go into giving you that just additional amount of money you need to actually finish the rebuilding. And then you don't have to pay it back for quite a long time, so that you have the breathing room to get yourself back on track. And if you do have to pay it back, it's a very, very low interest rate. So that's the type of program that can be created through this authority.
And I know I just want to speak to something you sort of corrected yourself on Palisades and Palisades Fire. This authority that the commission talked about is contemplated for the whole region. So the entire area impacted by Palisades Fire, Eaton Fire, all the fires, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can structure it any way you want. We had proposed a single authority, but two divisions. And I still think of it as areas, right? Because division sounds very bureaucratic, but I think of it as like geography. There are
Mhm.
two distinct fire zones. And
Mhm.
in my mind, those two distinct fire zones have their own sort of area that collects that tax income, and it's spent there.
Mhm.
Likewise, spent over here on Altadena. And so those two happen. But it could be for the sake of efficiency and government effectiveness, there could be kind of one backbone staff that services both of those districts. So that's what we imagine. You don't necessarily need two finance staffs or two accounting staffs or two HR staffs. You can do it with one single staff, but they have two project areas that they're working on because they're very different. So that's how I imagine that it could be formed, supervisor. But again, this is a very flexible thing. Our point was, however you want to organize it, it's important to create the entity soon so that you can actually be able to help folks who need to sell and want to be able to get a decent price and don't want it to flip to a speculative developer.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with Supervisor Barger, and she's very concerned about making sure that the Eaton community is driving the Eaton rebuild, and I share that concern. We want our communities to look like the communities that were there, to be restored by the community members who were part of those communities and prioritize that. And so, making sure that while we're creating an authority that will help to leverage scale across these areas, that we certainly create distinctions between the experience of each so we can help support the rebuild of community in a way that is signature to each neighborhood, and not, have Palisades people telling Eaton Fire folks what to do or vice versa, that community members are really driving what's happening in their community. So I know that was something that came up in questions, and you sort of alluded to it in your self-correction. So I just wanted to highlight that. And there is a very overarching fact sheet on this whole concept that also exists in the chat for those who are following along, in case you hadn't seen that. Okay, Cecilia, I'll go next to you again. Can you explain more about how land banking would work and how the community would have input in that process?
Great. I'm happy to do this. Again, this can be designed however you choose, but one way that land banking might work is, again, if folks want to sell, they can sell to anybody they want. They're not required to sell to the authority. But let's say they, for whatever reason, wanted to sell it to the authority because they felt like they just wanted to maybe not have it be sold to speculators. The authority buys it at a fair price, at market rate price, fair price. It holds that. And let's say it could get 200 lands or 400 lots. With 400 lots, that is buying power, right? So you can buy construction materials at scale. You can go to builders who do this all day long and say, instead of you building one bespoke house, hey, can you build 200 or 100 or 400 or whatever houses, and get the economies of scale there. So houses get rebuilt. The land is banked in the sense that it's brought together. And then as a group, those lots can be made available to merchant builders to build them. The authority still retains the ownership. And then the authority can make them available at a first look basis to former residents and say, would you like to come back to the area? Would you like to come back to your community? And here's the price we'll give you because you were a former resident. So you can kind of hold that value down. Now, not everybody's going to want to come back, right? I mean, people move on with their lives, but those who can and want to could come back at a more reasonable price than they would have if it was just completely market rate. The rest of the lots that are not sold to former residents can then go back to the market and they can be at elevated prices. But for the folks who are able to come back, they get to return to their community in a reasonable time. They haven't gone through the muss and fuss of and all of the details and of the rebuilding construction process itself. The agency has handled that for them, but they get to return to their community. So that's how land banking can work. And community
go ahead.
Yeah, how does it be community driven? We always, and we said it a number of times in the report, imagine that community members are actively engaged in oversight and advisory at all kinds of different points with this authority. So maybe they have seats on the authority, or maybe there's a community advisory council. Again, it depends on how you structure it, but they must have some representation and some ability to influence and affect the way that the authority does its work. We feel really strongly about that. And I'll just say from good practice, you're going to have the best results when the folks who have been most affected by a disaster like this are driving the process. And I know, Supervisor Horvath, that's very important to you. So I have no doubt that if such an authority is created, the structure will have built in community input.
Absolutely. Senator Allen, are you still, I don't see you at the top, but if you're still there, and want to speak to that, in terms of your legislation, I know that, at our stage, we looked at the legal authorities. That was what our motion was at the county. We don't have a fully baked proposal on, who's at the table, how many seats, and all of that in terms of the specifics around governance. But I know that that is something that we have to create with community, to make sure that there is community representation that is leading this and helping to shape that conversation, because that's a very important component of why we want to do this in the first place. Okay, Tracy, how much community engagement has there been on this topic? And what else can we expect in terms of community engagement to really fully realize what the Rebuild Authority can and should look like?
Yeah, I think to date, I know I myself have been to every community meeting that I can and have been very active in all of the various WhatsApp chats and different apps that have been developed since the fires. But in addition to that, the UCLA team that supported the Blue Ribbon Commission, I believe they attended 60 or so community meetings, to share some of the initial recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission and to get feedback from community members. And so there was quite a bit of community engagement that helped to inform the recommendations. Going forward, I think there's going to continue to be quite a bit of community engagement. Many of us there have been a lot of groups that have popped up. I know I'm more familiar with the ones that are in the Palisades, given that that's my community. But continuing to engage on this, particularly around this idea of the Rebuilding Authority. And I believe that there will be different ways to engage on that. I don't know the specifics, and maybe others do, maybe Cecilia does. But I know that there are intentions to continue to have conversations around what this could and should look like. While we were on this, I got a text message from one of our neighbors in the Palisades reminding me that We had a large meeting at the Snapchat headquarters where we were able to go through a lot of things. And there is a wonderful set of notes from that meeting on the feedback that we got from that. And would be happy to share that with folks as if they're interested.
That's great. Yeah. And so this could become a point of contention if we don't sort of drill into it a little bit. So you said there were 60 meetings, but there are some people who I'm sure are participating who didn't know about any of those. And so they're like, where they might think, who was in these meetings? Where did they happen? How did they happen? So can you give a little
Sure.
more insight into what you mean by 60 meetings and knowing that even if this is the very first conversation for some of you that you're a part of on this topic, there will be more conversations. As you heard, Senator Allen's office is going to lead a discussion. I know the council member is very interested in many community meetings and discussion, and this being an ongoing conversation. If this is the first time you've been part of it, don't worry, there will be more. But for those who were participating in all these, can you give a little bit more insight into what was happening in those meetings?
Sure. And I think, as many of us who are in the Palisades know that, particularly those of us in the WhatsApp chats, you get invited to a lot of different meetings. There are a lot of, I think one of the things that has been so inspirational in the wake of this disaster is how much this community has stepped up to fight for itself and, and to make sure that our voices are being heard. And so, we have a lot of really wonderful community leaders, Larry Vane and Miriam Czar and others. There's Team Palisades. So all of these groups have organized different community meetings. And UCLA, some of them were attended by multiple Blue Ribbon commissioners as well as the UCLA team. Others were primarily attended by the UCLA team. But any meeting that we were invited to or were made aware of, we tried to make sure had attendance from someone on the community. Many of them were community-driven meetings, and then a handful of them were organized between the community and the Blue Ribbon Commission team.
And so
I'm
they
not
were
sure if it's
60
helpful.
meetings just on the rebuilding authority and talking about the particulars. It was a lot of different topics at those community meetings.
It was a lot of different topics. So some of them, if they were community led, it was the community driving the agenda and making sure what their biggest concerns were, what they wanted folks to know or what they wanted to be elevated. But certainly the ones in which the Blue Ribbon Commission was helping to coordinate and was able to do a presentation, the Rebuilding Authority was a large part of those conversations.
I think it's helpful because obviously not every member of the Blue Ribbon Commission came from the Eaton Fire or Palisades Fire impacted areas. So getting a sense of what community concerns are to help drive what the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission has been is incredibly important. And so it's truly heartening to know that you all spent that kind of time to really get to know the community and have that be synthesized into the work that you were doing, in addition to bringing your own personal experience to it. Okay, new topic. Cecilia, how would this help, this authority, this concept, help rebuild rental housing stock or support legacy businesses to return? I know that in many cases there is a large focus on single-family home rebuilding, and that's significant and important. And I don't want to forget about our renters, what their homes might look like, and of course those businesses that you talked about, that make a community a community. So how would this help in those?
I so appreciate this question because a community is more than just the single family homes in it, right? So in terms of the businesses and the retail districts, without the authority, there really aren't any efforts or there's really not much focused on it. And the thing about recovery districts or rebuilding authorities is that they can focus on the entire community. Rebuilding authority could actually work to acquire the properties in some of these commercial corridors, make sure they get rebuilt, and maybe hold some of the rents at a more reasonable rate, while perhaps providing offsetting income from other uses. So it's able to kind of leverage its whole portfolio so that you can see some more residential or neighborhood serving retail come back rather than just national chains or super high-end stores, right? Again, left to its own devices, the market, one, probably won't rebuild the retail because there's not a huge market for retail out there right now, folks. Post-pandemic, it's been very, very difficult for retail businesses to make it anywhere. So this is an opportunity with a rebuilding authority to have a focused strategy around what is the kind of retail that can be sustained in this community? What are the rents that can be supported? And how do we kind of manage all of the inflows of money and so that we can make sure that that happens and doesn't take 20, 30 years to come back. So that's one. Apartments. This is something that I'm really focused on. Hundreds of apartments in the Palisades fire were affected, not to mention the mobile homes, right? And again, left to its own devices, there is no requirement that these apartments be rebuilt or rehabbed so that they are at the same rental levels that they were pre-fire. It's what made it possible for nurses and social workers and teachers and firefighters to live in these communities where the multifamily units, where the apartments. So what this authority can do, again, it could purchase some of that property from apartment owners that don't have the wherewithal to rebuild and bring them back. And then it can hold the rents at a more stable rate for a period of time. That's not something that the market would do. The market would probably acquire those lots, mow them down, and probably build back fewer lots, fewer units at much higher rents than what you saw before. So this is a way for government to intervene and make sure that you can have a more income balanced community return. I feel so strongly about this part of why an authority is important because there really isn't, nobody's been talking about any other great strategy to do this. We had a terrific member of the commission, Lori Schoenman, who's worked on rebuilding in disaster zones. She used to be at HUD all across the country. And this was one of those areas where she thought she kept rattling off all the different funding sources that could come in if you had an authority that was able to help deal with the apartments, right? But without that ability to purchase them or provide some sort of program to incentivize the owners to hold some of the rents down, you're just not going to have that outcome. So I can't underscore enough how important it is if you want to see any apartments come back and any kind of, mix of incomes, the authority is essential.
So I know that there are people listening who are open to this concept and really curious and wanting to get more information. There are also people who are thinking government getting involved on yet another layer is going to be a total nightmare. And they may have just heard what you said as this is an opportunity for government to come in and buy up the community and, have some sort of, communist effort to own this whole community. So how is it not that, for people who are skeptical, mistrusting of government, and what our intentions might be, to that end? I hear that you're saying, this is a way to protect from some of the fears that people have expressed. How do we also protect from that fear? Does it not become government overreach?
I so appreciate that question. Nobody's requiring anybody to sell anything to the authority. This is about willing transactions. So if folks want to sell, they can sell. And there's also the issue of community guidance. This is where that oversight body, where that advisory council is so critical. If the people of the Palisades feel strongly about their neighbors being able to come back, their neighbors who were the teachers in their community, who were the nurses in their community, etc. If they feel strongly about their friends and neighbors being able to come back, they may be interested in the authority buying an apartment complex and helping to have a mix of incomes there. But nobody's going to require it. And this is where community-driven recovery is essential. So this is about the community being in the driver's seat. There's not going to be some all-powerful authority that's going to come in and buy up everything in the Palisades. One, there's not enough money for it. Okay, let's be honest. But two, there's no interest in that. This needs to come back in a way that reflects the vision and the values and really the emotional needs of the community. You want to get something, it's not going to be exactly the same. We all know that, right? But you can still maybe get some of your community members back. You can get some of the flavor that made these communities, because it's not just the Palisades, Sunset Mesa, there's other, Malibu. You know the mix of neighbors that you had. Don't you want them back? So if you do, this gives you an ability to do it. If the community decides that, nah, you know what, cool, I'm out of here, I don't really care, you can sell to the highest bidder, that's fine. Then the authority can just do things like coordinating construction materials or coordinating the infrastructure. But it at least gives you the vehicle. If you want to do something more and do something that's tries to recreate some of the best of what you had, you at least have the tool. Without it, you're not going to get your community, not going to get anything back that looked like what you had before.
I want to use this question as an opportunity to touch on another fear that I've heard and be very clear that, this is not my intention. And the conversation that I had with the senator and the council member, I can speak, I know I can speak on this topic for all of us. We are not trying to use this as an effort to upzone or tell somebody to come in and build an 8-story something where a single family home once was. I know that there is concern and fear around that as well, which is why I led in the beginning by saying land use authority still exists with your local government authority. Their zoning, their codes still would apply. If this authority were to come to be in the form of a joint powers authority, a JPA, the participating entities could give the authority they could delegate some of that to this authority if they so chose. But by its very nature, creating an authority does not take away any of those rights. And we certainly aren't trying to turn what was, a very unique neighborhood, mostly of single family homes, but with a very charming character into, a Manhattan on the coast. That's not the goal of this effort. So I just want to be very clear about that. Okay, how will this authority assist with the logistics of rebuilding? Could it provide local staging areas for rebuild materials, reduce traffic? I know that there was also an idea around a cement location within this neighborhood. So, Cecilia, I see you want to maybe jump in on that.
I can jump in, and Tracy, please do as well. I don't want to monopolize this. And I'm also getting over being sick, so I'll stop talking soon. But yeah, so when I talked about, like, imagine the authority is able to purchase 400 lots generally. It can then sort of plan staging areas. It can say, okay, this is where the trucks are going to be parked, and this is where their construction materials are. It gives you the ability to do that from a much greater scale rather than having each individual builder for each ever lot doing that. So that is how you can do the coordination of infrastructure. Every time you have that heavy equipment come through, it destroys the streets. So it can sort of figure out what units that'll get built. This section's going to get built, then this section, then this section. So it can do it in a way that's logistically sound, that won't require that the streets get rebuilt several times in a row. And also, why not upgrade the infrastructure when we're rebuilding it, right? Why not create, and this is actually what I'd love to have Tracy come in. Why not build some climate resilient elements as you're rebuilding the neighborhood? It's something that was really important when we were talking about this, as a way to build cisterns or to build, more energy resiliency. So Tracy, please jump in, because I know this was an important part of your recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing for me, and as I'm reading through the chat, I just want to be clear, it's not the authority isn't baked. There's, it's not like people have decided what it is and what it's going to exactly do, and that it's going to have some, control or authority. Like, I think that what it does, really should be informed by what the community needs it to do the most. So, this is not fully baked. Some of the things that I think would, are really important when when we're thinking about the elements that we would want to incorporate to increase the climate resilience of of all communities, but have an opportunity to do things a little bit differently in the communities that were impacted by the fire, are to think about things like nature-based solutions, like stormwater capture, things that can be helped to make sure that We're thinking about issues around how can we address drought and flood and extreme heat, and we can incorporate these into how we're rebuilding our communities, whether again it's community parks that have stormwater capture that are in places where they could all, that cisterns that are underneath the parks could also be used for firefighting. And when they're not, they're used, for irrigation. Places that are, strategically placed that may be prone to flooding. There's a lot of different elements that we're thinking around like how do we ensure that we're more water efficient? How do we introduce more native plants so that we protect, the incredible biodiversity of our neighborhoods? I think one of the things that for me is so special about the Palisades was that incredible connection to nature. How do we create fire breaks within our neighborhoods? Both the Palisades and Altadena are, relatively dense communities. And so what can that look like when we're coming back in? And the authority can help to, I think, supplement the cost of some of those things, and help, put forward, what the community wants in their community. And I think that could be really, really incredible and really, really helpful because, these things can be critical as we're trying to design for the types of things that we're going to be facing 50 years or 100 years from now, and making sure that these communities are better prepared for those threats.
And I also want to add, a focus on, yes, we are talking about sustainability and resilience in terms of climate impact, but we're doing that also because that's directly correlated to fire safety. How do we make sure that we're keeping people safe in their communities going forward? How do we make it safer for those who will have to fight fires in the future and keep our communities safe? And how do we have them at the table in the conversation with us as well, which is why the Blue Ribbon Commission was focused on a resilient and fire-safe recovery, because we know that given 21st century climate challenges, there will be more safety concerns as a result. And so in our rebuild and recovery process, we want to give our community the best chance it has to, from the ground up, have all of the supports that we can imagine to give you a stronger and safer community now more than ever. I know we wanted to make a commitment to have a first conversation that was about an hour long. I know we're a little over 7:30 now. So I will wrap up by saying a few things. First of all, thank you all for participating, for joining us to get a sense of what this rebuild authority is and is not, why we are contemplating a rebuild authority, and what functions generally we would like it to have. I know that from the communication that's come into my office as well as others, that for many people, the devil's in the details. And so that's why ongoing community conversations are necessary. We couldn't get anywhere near to all of the questions that have come in today from all of you, but we have tracked them. We have a document in my office, so we can continue to answer those questions. This recording will live on our social media or on our website, so that way you can access it in the future. And we want to make sure that for all of the communities that are impacted, that your questions get answered, and that we are using your ideas, your concerns, and what you need to safely and successfully and resiliently rebuild, to be informing how this authority comes together. You can certainly reach out to our office with questions beyond this topic as well. And we certainly, we're putting that information in the chat to everyone as well. But I want to thank Cecilia and Tracy once again for your participation in our commission, for your participation tonight, for really engaging in a meaningful and sincere way with our community members. It's important for people to hear from a variety of perspectives why why we are taking the steps that we are. We know that trust has been eroded in many spaces, and how we rebuild that trust is by working with community to show them how we want to support and have an expedited but a smart and safe recovery for everyone. And that's really the goal of this effort. So I think I will leave it there. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to my team who helped to organize and support this effort. Thanks to the senator for joining us. I know he had to sign off, and we will see you again at a community meeting very soon.